Hey, Coach Holler.
Hi, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you doing?
How you feeling?
I'm feeling all right. I don't know, a little nervous.
I'm a lot nervous.
Yeah. I we'll see. I don't know. I mean, she had such a I felt a lot better 5 weeks ago, I'll say that much.
I think I did too, and maybe this is just cold feet,
Yeah.
to get close.
Yeah.
Um, and I think too that I don't know about you, but I'm experiencing a cesspool of musk on Twitter.
Yeah. I'm done with Twitter after this is over. I hope I can go out on top, but like I'm done. And I've met so many people and literally get all my news information, sport. I mean, Twitter is the internet for me. And I'm just absolutely done with it. Yeah, yeah. It's terrible.
My entire business was built on Twitter.
Yeah.
All my articles I put out on Twitter, all my opinions and like you say, my news. I used to be able to follow the people I wanted to follow, but now
Hmm.
I end up seeing more Musk
Yeah.
than friends.
Yeah, and I don't know if that swayed me to think that this country's going down the crapper in a hurry because man, you go like you look at any poll, like a New York Times Siena poll, and then you just go through the comments and it's like, holy moly, what is what is
Uh,
happening
yeah,
here?
the polls just absolutely kill me.
Yeah. Um, I don't know, but I do a lot of door knocking, and I'm
Good.
in Ohio, so central. I'm in Columbus, and just I mean, driving through the suburbs, there's Harris signs everywhere. Certainly, even in 2020, like if you saw a Biden sign, it was like, whoa, check that out, a Biden sign. And there's Harris signs everywhere. And on, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the people in the suburbs that vote, consistently. And so, um, you know,
Hey, can you
I,
see me fine?
I can see you. I just got a stock picture though. I don't have like you live.
I need to allow my camera to work, I think. Oh shit. Where do I do that? Here it is.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so we'll see. I don't know. The Michigan, from everything that I see, seems to be pretty pretty solid. Like everybody's pretty happy with that. But Wisconsin, again, same thing from what I've seen, is slipped a little bit. But I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around anybody voting for Donald Trump. So it's so hard to believe that tens of millions of people. Again, I get the white
Yeah.
guy, but again, I was knocking doors today and had a Latino woman tell me she's voting for Trump, and um, all kinds of other ones. That was just like, and we're instructed not to like follow up, just be like, okay, thanks, have a good day. At this point, you're not changing their minds, but I'd like to be like, man, where what um how are you doing that? But I don't know, the fact he gets so much what do they call it, sane washing and
Yes.
promotion, and it just so I people say, well, how can you vote for him? Well, if you don't fact check his lies and you just believe everything that you just take it at face, oh, it must be true. They are sending kids to school and they come back a different gender, then yeah, okay, I'll vote for him. But the fact that literally everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie, it just takes like 2 seconds to check it. And again, like you could not have watched the debate. And like debates just don't matter there's no reason to do them anymore. If you watch that debate and are still like, yeah, Trump's the guy. I mean, that was such a
Yeah, it is. My wife and I are talking today about we heard somebody say that they were going to come up with the idea or the facts that the assassination was staged.
Yeah.
And we both agreed that if they had proof, it would not affect one of his voters.
No, it wouldn't.
Proof.
Yeah.
Like,
The only voter he'd
there
have lost
will
was the one that got killed, in the
there
crowd.
there will be no October surprises because no matter what it is, it will be dismissed. So it's weird.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's literally nothing you can do. The some of the only thing I could think is some of the stuff at that rally tonight, though, that Madison Square Garden, some of the stuff there, I think, I mean, for a normal person cross the line a little bit, and I think you could put some pretty strong messaging around that, what was said to Puerto Ricans. And if it's a close race, 10,000 votes here or there, make a big difference. And you could put together a heck of a commercial to run about just how just filthy and disgusting that rally is.
Can't imagine.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
We can only hope. We'll give it another minute or two here, and then we'll get going.
Okay. Yeah, we tried to watch the Rogan conversation. That wasn't easy.
Yeah, 3 hours. I wasn't gonna sit through that one.
No.
They said, well, and you and I, know this, but last time in 2020 when Bernie went on that, he just got eviscerated for going on Joe Rogan's podcast, and everybody was like, "Oh, how can you?" There was basically, if you go on Joe Rogan, you approve of everything he's ever said, and none of that this time. Now it's always so brave and relates to the people and this, and it'll be interesting on that podcast. I saw a clip that said Rogan invited Kamala on, so it'll be interesting to see if she takes him up on that.
And I watched that podcast with Bernie.
Yeah,
he was terrific.
Right.
Rogan was so respectful. You almost felt like Rogan would vote for him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was as good as an appearance as Bernie could have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And but yeah, I mean, he got killed for even thinking that was a good idea.
Let me plug in my microphone before I forget.
Yeah, you go ahead. All right, as we get ready to roll here, we'll get started. My name's Scott Charland. Coach Holler and I put this strength coaches for Harris together. This will be our last meeting. We've done 2 before. This will be our 3rd one. Early voting has started just about everywhere across the country. Just to give you a little peek into what I do on the weekends. So I'm in Central Ohio. I go around and knock a bunch of doors for the Ohio Democratic Party. And one of the easiest things you can do to help with the election is to vote early. You see on all the rallies that Kamala does, vote early, vote early. So what I do every day is I essentially get a list of about 100 doors to knock. And the election board puts on there who's already voted and who hasn't voted. So the more people on there that have voted, I can get through my list quicker and get on to another list. So while it doesn't seem like a big deal, early voting really is one of the easiest things you can do to make a difference, so that, again, the Democratic Party isn't trying to run you down at the last second to make sure you voted. With that being said, though, Coach Holler, why don't you lead us off on this last Zoom meeting here?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm a little scared right now, as we were talking about before, about the election. I can't wait for it to be over. But for some reason, when I was thinking about what I'd say tonight, I thought back to my childhood and the sitcom of all sitcoms, All in the Family. Archie Bunker of All in the Family was the original MAGA guy, but it was like 50 years ago and before anybody talked about MAGA. And the middle verse of the song that the show opened up with was said something like this, and you knew who you were then. Girls were girls and men were men. Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. People seemed to be content. $50 paid the rent. Freaks were in the circus tent. Those were the days. Archie Bunker's right-wing intolerance was misogynistic and racist, so much so that it made people laugh. He was actually a joke. Who would have thought we would find ourselves in the modern world now? Archie was an old man who felt the world slipping away from him because women and blacks no longer knew their place. Too much progress made Archie an outcast in the world he once knew. His longing for the good old days made him miss Herbert Hoover. Here's a quick history lesson. Herbert Hoover was president in the 1920s and led us into the Great Depression. FDR got us out of the Depression with the New Deal, while people like Archie called it socialism, communism, called it liberalism, called it the welfare state. But FDR was really good. Archie was probably tormented by the Woodstock generation. I can almost hear Archie grumble when Richie Havens sang Get Together at Yasgur's farm back in 1968. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Damn hippies. I understand hating politics. My first time voting was in 1980. I voted third party. I voted for John Anderson. Through the years, I was a huge fan of Paul Tsongas, Ross Perot, and of course, Bernie Sanders. Until Barack Obama, I was not a big fan of any Democrat in the presidency. This is kind of embarrassing, but in the 1990s, I was radicalized by Rush Limbaugh and the conspiracy theories of right-wing radio. I began to perceive Republicans as tough, hard-nosed men, no different than the most successful coaches I'd always known. I saw Democrats as soft and willing to say anything to anyone to get their vote. When I hear of a woman being hired at a high school as a high school athletic director, this is embarrassing, but I immediately think it was a DEI hire. They wanted to hire a woman. You see, I grew up in a man's world, generals, politicians, business leaders, high school administrators, coaches, they're all men. Change is hard, progress is hard, and tolerance is hard. My growth has come from reading. My worst human instincts were put to rest because of the books I read. I'm worried that we will lose the most important election in our country's history. Clinton lost the 2016 election, even though she received 2.9 million votes more than Trump. Biden beat Trump by 7 million votes, but the election came down to 44,000 votes in swing states. Here are some cold, hard facts about the 2024 election. If only whites voted, Trump would win by 11%. This is amazing. I just looked this up today. Democrats have lost the white vote in every election since 1964. That's because of the Civil Rights Act. White people have voted against Democrats in every presidential election for 60 years. That's 14 straight wins for the GOP. If only white women voted, Trump would win by 4%. If only white men voted, Trump would win by a landslide, 19%. If only Christians voted, Trump would win. He would win Protestants by 14% and Catholics by 5%. If only non-college graduates voted, Trump would win by 11%. If only Southerners voted, we might as well call off the election. It's pretty depressing to me. And you wonder why Trump is the most openly racist presidential candidate in American history. I truly believe racism motivates the Republican base. Christians voting for Trump blows my mind. I'm relatively sure that Jesus was a progressive liberal and that Jesus was woke by Republican standards. I truly believe the rise of Trump was a backlash against our first Black president. The Archie Bunkers of our country united behind a guy that would fight the evil machine of progress. Trump would say the quiet things out loud. Among white men, Joe Biden lost to Trump by 23%. With the racist bullhorn of the Trump campaign, electing a Black woman will be an uphill battle. In my opinion, we have no chance to convert white males who are uneducated Christians from the South. We can govern them, but we can't win their vote. Nothing George McGovern could have said in 1972 could have won Archie Bunker's vote. Nothing. I've already voted. My one vote has been cast in a non-swing state. I'm depressed that we are experiencing what the Germans experienced in the 1930s, when 1/3 of their population wanted to eliminate 1/3 of their population, while the last third, the final third of their population, did not pay attention. If the polls are close to being right, 1/3 of the U.S. eligible voters will vote for Trump, 1/3 will vote for Harris, and 1/3 will not vote. 34% of eligible voters did not vote in 2020. 34%. This is where I think we can make a difference. The biggest political party in America is the I Don't Vote party. If Harris wins, voter turnout will be the key. The record numbers of early voters gives me hope, gives us hope. I believe when we vote, we win. I don't know about you, but I felt outnumbered in the past couple of weeks. I don't know if it's Twitter or what. I keep reminding myself of what Mark Twain would say. Twain said that when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. I would rather be on the side of the good, tolerant, intelligent people than the side of hatred. I saw something on Twitter the other day from a guy named Richard Marks. He said, I hear some folks saying there's hate on both sides, and I don't disagree. One side hates Black people, brown people, Asian people, gay people, and any people who don't fully subscribe to their own rigid ideologies. The other side hates bigots. It's kind of funny, but I don't think hate's the answer. And I don't think all masculinity is toxic. MAGA people love their mother and love their kids. They love their dogs. They're friendly as long as religion and politics aren't discussed. They are often the type of people who would be the first to stop and help you if you had a flat tire. I've known racist and misogynist coaches who treated Black people and women in their life with total respect. Their worldview was racist and misogynist, but locally they were good people. This reminds me of the Americans' schizophrenic view of education in our country. People believe American schools stink, but they think their own school is okay. They also think that kids these days are entitled jerks, but their own kids are great. MAGA people, just like Archie Bunker, have seen too much change in the world. What I see as progress, they see as our country falling apart. Their picture of a perfect America is a white neighborhood where men are kings and women serve the king. We can live with these people. We can tolerate these people. We don't have to agree with them to live next door to them as neighbors and treat them as friends. But Archie Bunker can never be in power. Trump must go away. I truly believe that when we vote, we win. And just talking to Scott tonight about him knocking on 100 doors over the weekend, I think that's the key. I think we just got to get out the vote. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Super and very well said. And a couple of things to follow up on that. There's a famous, who's the Archie Bunker? Carroll, what was his name? What's his name in real life?
Carroll O'Connor.
Daryl Connor, yeah, and he's on some talk show talking about it and just how, he played Archie Bunker just like a total idiot. Like nobody should look up to this guy, but he was kind of this working class hero. And he's like, guys, this guy's a joke. He's been held back by his beliefs and all this stuff. And yeah, you should be laughing with him. You should be laughing at him.
Yeah,
And
he would, people laughed more at his stuff than anybody else on the show because it was so outlandish. But
mhm,
in today's MAGA world, that's all we see.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's, my dad is 84 and obviously a white guy, non-college educated, and my mom will tell the story that he had a George Wallace yard sign in the yard in the 70s, and um, had kind of a later in life reawakening, but went from that to a double Obama voter, and voted for Hillary and all those things, but was also a part of a union. And what Reagan did to the unions in the 80s, like there was no coming back. So he was able to change his beliefs around that. But it can happen, but it's certainly double tough. And he's an example of that. But just like yourself, Democrats get a bum rap a lot of times for being too well, we got to invite the trans folks and the LGBT, but that's just, hey, it's a big tent, and if you're gonna if you're gonna let one group in, you got to let them all in, and that's just to your point about Christianity, like feels like we heard that somewhere before, where love everybody, but I guess I heard it wrong. So
Yeah, I always hear people say the far left and the far right are both awful. And I'm thinking, the people that we let in our tent, like transgenders and stuff, they aren't hurting anybody.
mm-mm.
They're just trying to live their life.
Yeah,
And like the far right are like the Proud Boys and the Oath
right.
Keepers. They're
Yeah, and you
hurting
hear that all
people.
the time about, the one transgender, she wanted to change her entire sex and get beaten and ridiculed and mocked just so she could play girls volleyball. Like, you really think that's the her sole purpose was that she could dominate, get a third place medal in swimming? Like, come on, I mean, just open your eyes. All right, well, Coach Holler, as usual, great job. Our next speaker is going to be Craig Cheek. Coach Cheek is currently at Baden High School down in Cincinnati here in Ohio. Was at the University of Notre Dame for almost a decade prior to that. Super excited. I actually talked to him. He reached out and we connected over COVID. But we're kind of Twitter followers. And prior to that, so Coach Cheek, why don't you go ahead and take it?
Okay, thank you for having me. Um, Not sure I can follow up Coach Holler as eloquent as he was, and I'll be quite honest with you with politics a little bit. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little out of my depth. Um, just I have various opinions, and I feel like there's things on the right that I could agree with, but the more and more um, and as close as we get to this election, I think ultimately it just comes down to, for like my household, is like be a good person. And I just can't confidently say that the person that the Republican Party is trotting out there is a good person. And I have two kids that they're of voting age now. They were not of voting age back in 2020, but they are now. And I want them to navigate this themselves, right? And not just vote because this is what mom and dad do. Does that make sense? Like I don't want them to just you're voting Democrat because that's what mom and dad do. But I mean, it became pretty apparent to my children that it's kind of a gong show over on the far right. It really is. And we watch the Sunday news shows every Sunday, and we don't do it in the hopes of, hey, we're going to learn some new information that might change our mind. Like just like people on the right, like our mind is already made up. We know who we want to vote for. Um, but I just the more and more they parrot people out here and the excuses that they're making to cover the belligerent behavior and the open racism. I think I didn't catch the rally today at Madison Square Garden, but I think there was a number of things said about Puerto Rico, living here in Ohio, what was said about the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. I mean, when every Republican in the state of Ohio, the mayor or the city manager, the governor has said that it was all BS, and they could not substantiate anything about Haitian immigrants eating animals in Springfield. And you have Senator Vance basically saying, "Well, I have to create stories to distract and get the media to talk about it." So, okay, now you're telling bedtime stories and it's all fear mongering. Like, but I don't think that there's anything that can convince people that these guys are shysters and charlatans every time that they talk. Um, Lindsey Graham was on TV this morning, and he's just a parrot or a puppet for the Republicans, and it's like none of this matters to them. And I feel like with former President Trump, he just wants to get elected. I don't think he really has any real interest in governing, and I don't think he really has a plan. There's really nothing in place. He just wants to get elected so he can, like, he wants to be seen as a dictator. Like, he wants that power grab, and it's just too much for me to even. My moral compass is leaning me towards, it can't allow me to even vote for somebody like that. Um, and I wish and I wonder if it's almost like in coaching now with the advent of the social media, how everything's out there and you see it and it's almost so overwhelming and I don't even know what to dive through anymore. Like, what are we supposed to be mad about this week? With strength training. Well, what are we going to be mad about this week with politics? Because it's so out there and I don't even know what to believe. You can, all the deep fake stuff that you can put on social media. It's like if I see something, you see the political ads, in the state of Ohio, there's Bernie Moreno, there's Sherrod Brown. And, they're going to pump out all this negative stuff about Sherrod Brown. Like, can you really believe it? Because then Sherrod Brown is going to put an ad out that debunks everything that was just said. So who do you believe? What do you listen to? And so, um, I've the last couple of weeks I've really tried to dive in and research, and it's kind of overwhelming trying to learn like every vote that the senators had in the Congress and what are they voting for actually, just to kind of fact check what I'm seeing on TV. Um, but again, it goes back to just as Christians, it's Christian for them as long as Coach Holler, you said it, like their kids are, all the other kids are bad, but our kids are good, right? And my faith, we believe that Jesus would have welcomed everybody into the tent, right? Okay, I don't, you're transgender, okay, you're still a human being, and you have basic human rights that I believe that the Republican Party is trying to strip away. And I just don't understand that why we're trying to treat people less than human, just because they fall down a different path than what they believe is right. And so I know I'm kind of meandering here a little bit,
Oh,
but
that's
I
great.
just I this is there's since I've been able to vote, um, I haven't throughout the 90s I didn't really vote. And so it wasn't until was it 2000 with Bush and Gore was my first time voting. So I've been voting since. And I will say before I get off is that I'm not certain that all the stuff that they're talking about both sides. I don't know how much is actually going to change, no matter who's the who wins. My grocery prices are still probably going to be up. Housing costs are still going to be up, and interest rates until they start going down. I mean, that's the person I'm interested in. Are you going to do you have a plan in place to change things that are going to affect people on a daily basis? And maybe I live in a little bubble here and I'm wrapped up and I don't, it hasn't happened to me, so I don't worry about it as much. But I'm not 100% convinced that no matter who wins, that on a day-to-day basis, my life is going to be changed a whole lot. but I do believe that if it goes if it goes Republican, I think it's just gonna heighten and ratchet up the intensity for more vitriol and hatred and bad stuff, man. And it's got that part has me a little bit worried.
Yeah.
They're talking tonight about the mass deportation program that they want to do and how much it's going to cost. And I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, and if in the beginning of that of your speech, you had mentioned, I don't know that much about politics, and so many people back away from talking about politics because of that very thing, because I don't know if you knew how many people I reached out to, names that everybody on this phone call would instantly recognize, and begging them to come and talk and be a voice and let me promote that you're talking and give permission for other people to feel that way. And they're just like, no, I don't really know that much about politics. And it's knowing right from wrong.
Right.
You know decency from hatred. You know right from wrong. You know everything you need to know about politics. And it really is that simple. And then just the second point, Craig. So similar to you, I had a son this fall is his first year in school, and Craig's son plays lacrosse at Cleveland State. My boy's a baseball player at Indiana State, and so two kind of white upper class sports. And my son, my son knocked doors for Bernie and with me in Iowa in 2020. And, so he's probably a little bit more cued into politics than a lot of the guys on his team, but he'll tell me, there's a lot of MAGA on his team. And every election, it's just like, gosh, if we can just get past this one, then it's smooth sailing. And Gen X is going to save us, and then Gen Z is going to save us. And it's like, man, these young boys, especially, they're not men. They're just not. They get bombarded with the Rogans and all that kind of Andrew Tates of the world just constantly. And we as rational adult males, have such a big part to play in their lives and guiding them down a path. Again, to Craig's point, hey, you want to vote Republican, you want to vote Democrat, you knock yourself out, but understand right from wrong and decency from hatred and the truth from lies, if nothing else.
And that's got my father, who was a staunch Republican pretty much his entire life. And he back in 2020, he switched and he voted for Hillary Clinton. And he is just so disgusted right now with Donald Trump. And you cannot have a conversation with my dad without him bringing this up. And he has a large family. All of his brothers are very 100% Donald Trump. And now my dad's to the point, he just pokes the bear with them just to get them all fired up and get them going. But that he sees that human decency side, and he's like, it's sickening. And he's like, he can't bring himself to be in the Republican Party anymore if this is what they're standing for.
Yeah, and it goes back to that saying, not every Trump supporter is a racist, but every Trump supporter decided that racism wasn't a deal breaker.
Right.
And that's hard. I mean, that's just shocking. That and you can throw in xenophobic, sexist, whatever. I mean, you can insert the prejudice wherever you'd like, but it's
I really like what Craig said when he talked about, it's almost a full-time job to stay on top of things. I mean, like you could like read and watch TV all day long and still miss stuff. And I heard somebody said it's like we have a choice to get on the Harris bus or the Trump bus. And neither bus are we going to agree with everything. In neither bus will we understand everything. But to Scott's point, I think there's a deep down visceral thing, like what kind of people are we? And it scares the hell out of me when I heard somebody say that Trump may win, and if he does, that's who we are. That's scary as hell.
Well, and I've told people that when all the indictments came out against Donald Trump and it didn't seem to move the needle, I said that's an indictment on the United States. That's an indictment on us, on people that
Yes.
they people don't care.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, there's almost
scary.
a weekly story that comes, whether it's the stuff in Arlington or the suckers and the losers or the
Mhm.
eating the cats and the dogs. I mean, there's almost a weekly story that in the past would have sunk any presidential candidate. That again, he just gets an absolute free pass. And to your point, has that become what we are as Americans, where it's just like, doesn't bother me, doesn't affect me. I'm not eating the cats and dogs, so I don't live in Ohio, so that's probably true. You know,
Right.
it is, to Tony's point, boy, it's scary what we've allowed him to get away from. And as those images and presentations from that rally tonight get put out there more, wow, I mean, it is a little frightening, and it's tougher for us as white men. Like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to be more than likely okay, but our daughters, you know, our wives, immigrants that need help, those folks aren't insulated like we are, and it is truly scary for them what this country could become under Donald Trump.
You know, Scott, I had a good friend that I was talking to last week, and I didn't even know that he and his wife had lost their baby. And it was one of those sonogram type deals where they found out there was a severe defect to the heart. The prognosis was like it maybe would be born, but it would never live. You know, one of those situations. And, you know, one of those situations where people, you know, have to make their own decision and take care of it. And what I said to him is, thank God you didn't live in Texas. You know, I mean, if you think about it, once you get that diagnosis, you don't just drive somewhere later that afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a couple weeks, and you know, like, how do you go to another state? And yeah, the reproductive freedom is I don't think people really understand how big of a deal that is.
And just try and imagine the shoe being on the other foot. And again, as white men, reproductive freedom, whatever. Hey, you should have, you know, I mean, my goodness. um, you know, raise your hand if you haven't had a close call that we're like, hey, at least, you know, hey, if anything goes wrong, we can we can get out of this with, again, a son, a friend, a brother, and if that shoe was on the other foot and it was us, and rights got taken away from men, I mean, they'd burn the country down before they let that happen. But it's you know, they can control women, and that's what is the next thing they're going to want to control, and then what's the next thing, and they just kind of play this game of, you know, inching closer to see what they can control, and then before you look, it's all gone. We only had two scheduled speakers tonight. Would anybody else on the line just like to say anything? The last time I was on, my wife had said, "Oh, you ought to open the floor at the end to see if anybody else wants to talk." But if anybody else would like to say anything,
Sure.
we certainly would let you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Larry Howard. I'm the director of strength and conditioning here at DePauw University in Indiana. I've had an opportunity as a coach to be in different places. I started off in Chicago, and then I moved to Mississippi, and seeing the different contrasts between different states, being in a very deep blue state from going there to a very, very deep red state, while being a strength coach, while starting a family. I think that this election earmarks a lot of different things that I've seen. And I have a lot of thoughts on certain things. The first thing I would say is I think that, and I know this is going to sound very much coachy, so to speak, we need to look at our leadership between Kamala and Trump and ask, are we dealing with transactional leadership versus transformational leadership? And I think that's one thing that there's a stark difference between the two in terms of what I've gotten just from watching CNN, and I go to both. And I'll tell you, I'm voting for Kamala Harris, but I've gone to both because I think that it's important to be able to see both perspectives in order to be able to give and to have an educated conversation pertaining to these different matters. Now, obviously, as a director of strength and conditioning, you only have so much time, but I have had a chance to watch some of Donald Trump's rallies, and he has explicitly said in many cases, "I don't care about you. I just need your vote." And that has come across multiple times where it has been very much a transactional thing. Donald Trump has been on the record many times just indicating that this election and his decisions in this election are very much based on his best interests and the best interests of his friends. That's the first thing I would say. And I see that as a country we need, and if we were to ever have another Republican that is honorable to run, my challenge to even their party is to put a transformational versus a transactional leader on the ticket. That would be the first thing I would say. Second thing I would say, and I have a master's in urban ministry. I am a Christian, born again. I just want to make sure I put that out there. But I think it's very important that we as a country define, are we a theocracy or a democracy? And I think the reason why I say that is because, I was watching a sermon today where a very conservative pastor was talking about how elections inform decisions. And of course, he pointed out reproductive rights and used different biblical scriptures and things to that effect, right? But there's a huge hypocrisy when you care about the life of a child prior to the child being born, and you do not care about the care of the child after the child has been born. I can tell you, as a person who has a 9-month-old, and we gave birth down in New Orleans because healthcare in Mississippi was just so awful. My wife was denied maternal care in terms of maternity leave. So had it not been for me working, we would not have been able to stay afloat during that time, which gets me to think, if you have single mothers, and this is a state that does not mandate maternity leave for parents or parental leave for parents, a very much conservative red state, but you're pro-life, but you have no desire to put in place things that will secure the quality of life for the child and make sure that that child has enough food to eat and is able to exist in a way that is dignified. Because if you have a single mother who does not have another person that is a partner to her in her pregnancy or support system, if there's no maternity leave, what do? You're in a situation where that's not taken care of. And I noticed, to me, I began to think about all the hypocrisies when it came to, you're kind of cherry picking where we want us to be a theocracy versus where we want us to be a democracy. We're a theocracy when we care about pro-life, abortion bans, all those things. But we're a democracy when it comes to common sense gun legislation that would actually prevent the ability of mass shooters to outgun the police, which in that sense is a hypocrisy, because you're pro-blue until it comes time for you to disarm in a way that would give you the ability to outgun the police. So again, I think that we as a country have to come to terms with what makes common sense and put people in office that can recognize, yes, I can have deeply rooted ties to my faith and still believe that women should be making decisions about their own bodies with their health providers. There's no reason why, as a person, and I say this as a young father, why I should have to worry about the safety of my doctor, the safety of my wife, and family planning, due to the fact that if there is, heaven forbid, a miscarriage, the doctor having to come in and figure out and deem that this was actually a miscarriage and not be able to get the appropriate health care for my wife. That is problematic. And if we're going to be, I think that my issue that I'm having with especially this MAGA movement is that in many ways it's just hypocritical. It's hypocritical. It's not fake. There's not, you cannot sit from a theological standpoint and say that what you are putting forth is faith-based aligned, because there are many areas where you're not. And the reality of the situation is, I think that if we are going to be a true free country, well, that means that we should be able to have the freedom to practice our faith in a way that is near and dear to us. And that should not be something that the government imposes on every single American that's here. That's something that I personally believe. That's something that I think we should shift to. And I think that if we can make that type of shift and not be bamboozled by this theocratic talk of a person who does not believe in God, I think we'd be probably in a better place.
Yep. Very well said. And I'm going to go to a full circle moment of all time here. So you talk about your child being born in New Orleans because of the healthcare and in Mississippi. So when I had my first child, I was at Ohio State, and my boss, who Coach Anthony Glass, who's on this call, even Ohio State, there was no like paternity leave or anything like that. If you wanted to take vacation, you had to take your vacation, and otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. And my wife was down in Alabama, and again, just out of the generosity and kindness of his heart, he knew, I said, hey, my wife's having a baby, and he's like, hey man, you take off, you come back, and we'll see you when you get back, and was totally understanding and compassionate around that. And Coach Glass, for those of you that don't know, just absolutely legendary strength and conditioning coach, an alpha male among alpha males, and showed, me when my child was being born, great compassion and understanding. And, that's again, I think what the Democratic Party can offer is, again, compassion over hate and understanding over, bigotry and those kind of things. So it's ridiculous in this country that there is no paid family leave, medical leave, maternity. I mean, and to the Democrats' own fault. They could do it if they wanted to, but it's easier to run on the issue than to solve the issue. But anyway, that gets a whole nother thing going. Thank you, Coach Howard, for that, and welcome to Indiana. DePauw is a great place over there. I lived in Indianapolis for a number of years, so we're excited to have you in Indiana and working with student athletes there. Anybody else have any final thoughts or anything they'd like to say?
I'll chime in real quick. All I wanted to say is thank you for the opportunity to listen to you guys. I tell you, Scott, Tony, this is wonderful what you guys have put together. And I love the words, me being a Black man and I'm from North Carolina. So I grew up in the South, coached in the South, coached the Midwest, and I have Black kids. And so it's extremely disturbing what I see. I think the sad part for me is the number of Blacks that I know that are voting for Donald Trump, that are completely confused. And then also Latinos. I actually just got back from Puerto Rico yesterday. The number of Latinos, and I still find it hard to believe that people can take anything this man says serious. But I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all for your words. And I think this is great. We've got to get people out there and vote. I've got a sign in my yard and in my neighborhood, believe it or not, in my neighborhood, there's probably 75, 80 homes, and it's a very upper class neighborhood. There's no Trump signs, there's mostly Harris signs. So that's a strong positive right here in Central Ohio. So But again, thank you. I won't say anything more than that, but just thank you very much for what you guys are doing.
We appreciate that, Coach Glass. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? If not, we will wrap it up there. I'll send out a couple more invites, one on next Sunday, and then the following Sunday will either be celebratory or not so celebratory. But yeah, get out there, vote, talk to your neighbors, talk to your student athletes about getting out there and voting. Vote early if you can. And again, thank you everybody for getting on this call. It was recorded, so I'll have the recording out tomorrow, and you all have a good rest of your evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
Scott.
Scott. Thanks, everybody.